Today, we are diving into a really fascinating and I think incredibly useful school of thought, philosophical pragmatism. Now, this is a big one. It's an idea that if you get it, can really change how you think. It's all about cutting through the noise and getting down to what actually matters. So let's just jump right in. So I bet you've heard this phrase before, right? Truth is what works. It's kind of the bumper sticker for pragmatism. And you can see the appeal. It sounds so simple, so direct. It feels like it just slices through centuries of complicated philosophical debates. But here's the catch. And it is a huge one. That simple little slogan, it's also the source of almost every single misunderstanding about this philosophy. Because if you take it at face value, it sounds, well, kind of selfish, right? Like truth is just whatever is convenient for you in the moment. But the thinkers who came up with this idea, they meant something way, way more profound and a lot more demanding. Okay, so here's the game plan for today. First, we're going to tackle that whatever works myth head on. Then, we'll get to know the brilliant minds who created this whole thing. After that, we'll look at the real payoff, like how this way of thinking can actually dissolve some age-old problems. And we'll wrap it all up with a whole new way of looking at what it even means to know something.
All right, let's start with that big misconception. If what works doesn't just mean whatever I want to be true, then what on earth does it actually mean?
So here's a much clearer, much more accurate way to put it. Pragmatism isn't about what feels good. It's about what survives a tough, disciplined investigation. It's a philosophy that demands we ask two really hard questions about any idea. One, what tangible, real-world difference does this idea make? And two, how does it actually perform when we test it against reality, over and over again? It's not about what works for me, it's about what proves itself out in the world. You can almost think of pragmatism as giving you this mental toolkit. So the first tool is meaning and use. To really get an idea, don't just write down a definition. Ask yourself, if I believe this, what does it commit me to doing? How does it change my actions? The second tool is truth as warranted. This is so important. It says truth isn't just a gut feeling, it's what a community of careful investigators would eventually agree on if they kept testing and arguing honestly. And finally, my favorite, knowledge as corrigible. This is the radical idea that we don't get smarter by pretending we're certain, we get smarter by being brave enough to admit we might be wrong, and then fixing our mistakes.
You know, this way of thinking didn't just pop out of nowhere. It really came out of a deep frustration. For centuries, philosophy had been kind of stuck. You had thinkers spinning in circles, desperately searching for absolute, 100% certainty, or getting lost in these endless abstract debates that seemed to have zero connection to real life. And then, the pragmatists looked over at the world of science, which was just exploding with progress. And they saw a different model. Science wasn't about finding absolute truth on day one. It was about experimenting, testing, being wrong, and slowly, piece by piece, building better models of the world. And they asked this game-changing question: what if philosophy could work like that too?
And that question was taken out by a few truly brilliant thinkers who laid the entire groundwork for pragmatism. So let's get a feel for who these people were. You can really see how the idea evolved by looking at these four. It really kicks off with C.S. Peirce, this incredibly smart logician who wanted to make philosophy as clear as science. His whole thing was, let's define our ideas by their practical, observable effects. Then you get William James, who kind of popularized it and made it personal. He talked about the cash value of a belief, how it pays off in your actual life. After him, John Dewey took these ideas into the real world, arguing that knowledge is a tool we should use to solve big social problems, like in education or democracy. And then way later, you have Richard Rorty, who took things in a more radical direction, suggesting we should think of our beliefs less as pictures of reality and more as different vocabularies or tools we use to cope and get along with each other. Let's just pause on that phrase from William James for a second. Cash value. I know, it sounds a little materialistic, maybe even cheap, but it's actually a fantastic metaphor. He's forcing us to ask, of any idea, what's the actual, concrete payoff? Forget the elegant theory for a minute. If you adopt this belief, how does it actually change the way you walk through the world? What new possibilities does it open up? What actions does it lead to? That's its cash value. And this example just nails what works really means in pragmatism. Think about a bridge. The belief that this bridge is safe isn't true just because it makes you feel good about driving across it. It works. It is a true belief because it successfully predicts that the bridge will hold up against the cold, hard, stubborn facts of physics, of gravity, of metal fatigue. Reality gets a vote. The world pushes back. And a belief that works is one that can stand up to that pushback.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. Because once you have this practical, reality tested approach, you can start to use it on some of philosophy's oldest, most frustrating problems. And sometimes you find they just dissolve.
Take this question, for example. I mean, for literally centuries, philosophers were obsessed with this. The goal was to find some kind of bedrock, some beliefs that were so absolutely 100% certain that you could build all of human knowledge on top of them. But it's a quest that almost always ends in total skepticism, right? Because if you can't be sure of anything, well, how can you know anything? Pragmatism just sidesteps this entire trap. It says, what if we've been chasing the wrong goal all along? Instead of certainty, what if the goal is corrigibility, the ability to fix our mistakes? From this view, knowledge isn't like a perfectly stable skyscraper built on a flawless foundation. It's much more like a weather forecast. It's a useful model that we are constantly testing, updating, and improving as new data comes in. Being rational isn't about being right all the time. It's about getting better at becoming right over time. Okay, here's another one of those classic philosophical head-scratchers. What are you, really? Are you some kind of mysterious, invisible soul that lives inside your body? Or are you just a chaotic bundle of thoughts and feelings that change from moment to moment? People have been arguing about this forever. So the pragmatist just cuts through all that. Instead of looking for some hidden thing called the self, they ask a much more practical question. What does the idea of a self actually do in our lives? And the answer is pretty amazing. The self is that continuous thread that connects your memories, that develops a character, and this is the key. It's the thing that can make a promise today and be held accountable for keeping it tomorrow. The self isn't some ghost in the machine. It's the living, breathing pattern of responsibility that you create through your actions. So let's zoom out and try to nail down the big takeaway here. Pragmatism isn't really just another ism to add to the list. It's an invitation to think about truth and knowledge in a fundamentally different way. Let's try to synthesize this. Okay, let's bust these two myths for good. Myth number one, whatever works for me is true. Nope, the real meaning is what survives a rigorous, public, disciplined investigation over the long haul. It's about what works for everyone who's looking honestly. Myth number two, oh, so it's just relativism, anything goes. Not at all. It's based on something called fallibilitism. And that's just the simple, humble idea that any one of our beliefs at any time could turn out to be wrong. And think about that. The very fact that we can be wrong implies there's a real world out there that can prove us wrong. And that's why this way of thinking is still so powerful today. It just feels true to life. It mirrors how science actually makes progress, through trial and error. It frees us from that paralyzing search for perfect certainty, but it doesn't let us just drift into a world where nothing is true. And maybe most importantly, it takes philosophy off the dusty shelf of abstract ideas and turns it into a practical, hands-on tool for making our lives and our communities just a little bit better. So I'll leave you with this final thought, a kind of pragmatist challenge. The next time you run into a big idea or a deeply held belief, either someone else's or your own, what if, just for a moment, you resisted the urge to immediately ask, is it true, with a capital T? What if instead, you started with a different question? What practical, concrete difference would it make in the world if this idea were true? That simple shift in focus, well, it might just change everything.